as if-else statements and loops. So now we're going to apply all of that knowledge to an assignment, and through this we're going to learn some new things as well. So I'm going to create a new project. We're going to create a Java project, right click there and hit new, and this is going to be called car underscore dealership. Okay, because that's what we're going to sort of simulate with this project. We're going to create a car dealership program. So hit finish, and we're going to create our first class here. Let's right click here and go to class, and then it's going to be called dealership, and we want the public static void main method in here. Hit finish, and this is our class. Let me just get rid of this commenting. So before we move any further, I want to actually give you an assignment so you can brainstorm how to think about building it and actually write it out yourself before we work on the solution together. So here's the assignment. Write a program to simulate a car dealership sales process. And in the dealership, we have employees that do all the sales work. And then we have vehicles parked outside of the lot. And then we also, of course, have customers that come into the dealership and purchase the vehicles. So think about how you would go about writing this program. I'll offer you a hint. Anytime you're faced with a scenario, of a computer program that you have to develop, you want to think about nouns. Okay, this is very important when it comes to object orientation, not just Java, but any object-oriented language. When you have to write a computer program and you're just sort of starting off, brainstorming the thing, you want to think about nouns. And what's a noun? For those of you that are not English majors, I'll define that for you. A noun is either a person, a place, or a thing. Okay, so in our simulation here, in our scenario, I'm asking you to write a program to simulate a car dealership sales process. So in the dealership, we have employees, we have cars, and we have customers. So think about the nouns in this scenario. We of course have 4 nouns. We have the dealership, we have employees, we have customers, and we of course have vehicles. So we're going to be involving multiple classes, using them together to create this simulation. So let me fill out some of the hidden details for you. I'm going to right click here, go to new, go to class, and let's first create a customer. And this is not going to have the main method. Remember, we just want that in one class, the dealership, and that's where all the action is going to happen. That's where your computer program will start and end. So let's hit finish, and this is the customer class. So we're going to be creating instances of this class in their dealership and sort of mimicking the sales process. So of course, what does a customer do? Well, he purchases a car. So let's define a method, and it's going to be a void method. It's not going to return anything, and we're going to call it purchase car. The arguments that go in here is it's going to be a vehicle, and this is of course a class that we have yet to create. It's going to accept a vehicle object. It's going to accept an employee, right? This customer is going to reach out to an employee and say, hey, I need to purchase a car. And the final argument to this is going to be of type Boolean, and we're going to just call it finance. You have to create a class for vehicle, you have to create a class for employee, and this finance, when we invoke the purchase car method in this dealership class, we're going to create an instance of customer, and that guy is going to invoke its purchase car method, and he's going to pass in the details, what vehicle he wants, what employee he has chosen to get help from, and then this third argument is finance, whether he wants to finance the car or not. All right, so this is a Boolean data type, so it's going to only accept true or false. And let me just fill out some of this for you here, just so that you have a path to follow when you code this up. So we'll first create a customer object, and I'll just call it cust1, and it's going to be, of course, a new object, right? So we have to use the new keyword there. And another thing I'd like you to do is create variables in this class, right? A customer has certain attributes. So let's say the customer, of course, has a name, right? A customer also has, for example, an address. And let's just say the customer also has cash on hand. All right, the amount of cash he has in his pocket. So this is an open-ended assignment. I want you to be as creative as you want in order to implement this. And the implementation of these methods can be simple. You could just print out the information, but I want you to think about how do you use multiple classes to implement a simulation like this, okay? So back in the dealership, we can give this customer object, we can give his name, we can make his name to be, let's say, Tom, and we can make his address to be, you know, anything. I'm just going to say 123 anything street, okay? And then his cash on hand, we can say he has $12,000. That's $120,000. That's a lot of cash to have on hand walking into a dealership. So let me make that more reasonable. $12,000. And then this customer, cust1, will invoke this method right here, purchase car, okay? And your job will be to initialize a vehicle, an employee, and then you can pass in the fact that, you know, whether he wants to finance the car or not. So I'll just say false, or you can do true and be as creative as you want in handling this situation. Now for the employee class, let me give you some guidance. Let me put in some comments here. In the employee class, I want a method implemented called handle customer. And that's going to take a customer as an argument, the first argument. The second argument is whether he wants to finance the vehicle or not. And I'm just going to give that variable name to be finance. It's going to be of type Boolean, true or false. And the final thing is going to be the vehicle that the customer wants to purchase. So notice this is the data type vehicle. You're going to need to create that class, and this is the variable name. I just left that to be the lowercase version. So in the body of this method, if the finance is equal to true, if that value is equal to true, then I want you to implement another method that should also be inside of the employee class called runCreditHistory. And this method could, you know, accept the customer as an argument and the loan amount. And this loan amount is of course going to be of type double. It's going to be a dollar amount. And this is going to be the difference between the vehicle price and the cash on hand that the customer has. And then out here we can have an else clause. If the finance is false, only then it's going to enter this else clause. And in that case, we're going to invoke this process transaction method. We pass in the customer and we pass in the vehicle the customer wants to purchase. And this is just going to be straightforward. You can just return that the customer has purchased the vehicle if if he's not financing the thing. And of course the vehicle should be of the price that he has on cash on hand of $12,000. So you can actually make this an else if. And if the vehicle dot get price, this is a method that I'm invoking on the vehicle object, dot get price, if the vehicle's price is less than or equal to the customer's cash on hand, we could do cust dot cash on hand. Then we could just do process transaction. Otherwise, in the else clause, we can say we can tell the customer, tell customer to bring more money. Okay, and here you can literally just print that out, bring more money. Just use the system.out.println statement here in the else clause. So notice that I have this method called getPrice. This is something that you would have to define in the vehicle class. And as a matter of fact, in the customer class, you're going to need a method called, let's say, get cash on hand. And this should return the amount of cash that this customer has. So notice that over here I'm directly assigning the variables of this customer object the data, but I'm over here using getters. These are called getters. And the reason for using getters is it allows for encapsulation. And encapsulation just means hiding the data. The customer is going to be an important object in this application, just like all the other objects. So we don't want to allow other users of the customer class to be able to just willy-nilly change the values of the variables in the program, right? We want to sort of hide that information and sort of abstract it away behind methods, encapsulating the functionality in methods. You want to change the name? You call the setName method. You want to give him an address? You call the setAddress method. If you want to give him cash, you invoke the setCashOnHand method, okay? And if you want to get those values, you can call the get versions of that data. And this just adds a little layer of information hiding from the client, from the users of this class. Let's say, for example, every customer is granted some kind of bonus when they enter, and we say, okay, you're going to get $5,000. So the cash on hand that they have, let's say we set that to $12,000. Well, somewhere in the set cash on hand method, we may be adding some extra numbers to it, or increasing or decreasing the amount of money that he has. Or maybe we want to customize his address in a certain way. When someone says set address and passes an address, we may want to do some further processing of validating that address and changing things around. So you can encapsulate that functionality in methods rather than directly, willy-nilly giving users the ability to change the variables directly. We don't want to do that. And this is going to be a common theme that's going to come up over and over again in this course, encapsulation. And you're slowly going to begin to understand it, but I'm going to introduce that to you here superficially. And we're going to see a lot more of this throughout the course. Let me actually make this a little easier for you for implementing these get cash on hand and get price. We can go back to the customer class and we can make these variables private. Remember, we spoke about access modifiers, so I'm going to make these private so that they are only visible in this class. And over here, notice that we're no longer able to access these variables directly. See, it says the field customer.name is not visible. Customer.address is not visible, and same goes for cash on hand. So how would we make this class get access to those variables? Well, we can implement something called getters and setters. And the way that works is just hover your mouse over here and click on this right here. Create getter and setter for address. So just actually you can do right click and go to source and click on generate getters and setters. And this is going to generate accessibility to those variables. So click on that and select address, cash on hand, and name. So these variables are now going to have both of these methods, get address and set address. Cash on hand will have get cash on hand and set cash on hand. And same thing goes with name. So let's hit OK, and boom, there you go. We have these automatically generated methods. And now, instead of directly changing the data, we can actually do this. Instead of .name, we could do .set name. Okay, and inside of these parentheses, we're going to pass in the data that we want to set on this object customer. All right, and then the same goes with the address. So we could do set address and then pass in this string for the information. So now this customer has the name Tom, and we're setting his address to be this. And then same thing goes with cash on hand. So you could do dot and look for the method called set cash on hand, and here it is. So click that and pass in this $12,000 into the argument of that method, and there you go. Now you still have to create the vehicle class and the employee class, and my recommendation is to do what I just did with customer, is to create some variables that you think should belong in the vehicle, such as the make, the model, the color, the price. Very important. You need to have the price for the given vehicle. And create these getters and setter methods. So instead of accessing the variables directly, you can use these methods, which allow for better information hiding. So we can set the name, and then of course we can get the name by issuing that get method, just like we're doing down here. For example, for the vehicle, we're doing dot get price. Okay, so this should give you a good overview as to start thinking creatively about solving this problem. And this might take you some time to figure out on your own, but I highly recommend that you get that practice. This is very important. It's hard to find assignments like this to get practice on object orientation, but it's crucial. I want you to take the time to think this scenario through and build it on your own as much as you can. It doesn't have to be right. It just has to, you just have to put in the practice and get your brain thinking in this direction. So again, these setters and getters, let me just visit that real quick. Let's look at set name. Notice all it does is whatever we pass into this method from the dealership class, it takes that and assigns it to the field of this class, this instance variable. So whatever we set it would belong to that particular instance, all right? So I'll show you an example. Let's say that, for example, the address, instead of directly assigning the address, I want to append to this address, and you can do plus equals some data, right? I can say dealership city. Okay, so if the customer walks in, they give us the address, whatever it is, this is going to be appended to the end of that. So this is an example of information hiding. Back in the dealership class, when someone uses this customer class to set an address, they will, unless they open the customer class and sees what's going on behind the scenes, to them they're just going to give an address. But the system may want to enter this extra detail before saving it into the database. If we didn't have this set address, someone may have just willy-nilly added an address, and that would not conform with our system. Our system, we want to add this little thing at the end, all right? And cash on hand, let's say that we want to give every customer an extra $500. So we can actually, this is the get method, so whatever is the value of cash on hand, that's what's going to get returned. So in the set cash on hand method, whatever's passed into this, before it gets saved to that particular instance, we want to just give cash on hand an extra $500. All right, and this of course works differently. This is a double, so it's going to add, since it's numeric over here, it's appending the data to the end of the string with this plus equals. Over here it's adding. So these operators work differently depending on the data type that's passed in. This is getting numeric data and this is getting string data, so it's going to behave differently. But basically the idea is that we are hiding the details in these methods, set cash on hand and set address, and this just allows for more control and encapsulation of the details rather than allowing the users of our class to just willy-nilly give some data directly. So this gives a lot more control and encapsulation to the developer rather than allowing direct access to these variables. So I encourage you to create your classes the same way. This is actually best practice. And most programming languages have this concept of information hiding and getters and setters. Even if you don't see them, they're most probably implemented in the background of any object-oriented language out there. Java, everything is sort of verbose, so you have to declare each one of these methods yourself. But this, I like the way this is done through Eclipse. You can just right-click and go to Source, and then click on Generate Getters and Setters, and it'll automatically generate the getters and setters for you for the fields that you've defined in this class. So back in the dealership, you're going to be, we've already created a customer. You're going to be creating a particular vehicle that the customer is going to get interested in. We're going to create an employee, right? You're going to initialize an employee object, and that's all going to be passed to the purchase car method. And inside of purchase car is where all the magic is going to happen. I leave that to you as an assignment. And don't forget down here the logic in the employee class of how the employee will handle every customer, depending on the amount of money they have and what was passed into the finance. So of course, the employee object that's passed into this class, into this method, purchase car, that employee right here in the body of it is going to invoke this method, handle customer and run credit history and process transaction. And these methods should be defined in the employee class. Okay, so once again, here's the snapshot of the assignment. So I'm going to wrap up this long video now. In the next lesson, we're going to go over the solution to this. So make sure you do your due diligence to try this out. Really work hard on it. Struggle with it if you have to. That's going to make all the difference. I'll see you soon.